No one ever sat me down and talked about the beauty of what making love is. And I really want you to think about those words, making love, because I always thought that was such an interesting term for having sex, right? With your partner. What you're doing is you're curating energy. You are at your most powerful.
Let's talk about change. The truth is, nothing changes unless you change. And if you want to step into your full potential, you need to surround yourself with the right people. That is exactly why I have created the InPowered Life community. Within this community, I'm going to be teaching you the exact same mindset and energy practices that I have taught my clients that are paying me well over six figures, including CEO owners of billion-dollar organizations and professionals at the very top of their fields. You're going to get access to 2 live virtual calls every single month with me, where we're going to dive into mindset, energy practices, spiritual principles that are going to help you thrive in every area of your life. Can't make a call? No worries. We're going to provide you with a recording so that you can catch up anytime. Plus, you're going to have the opportunity for direct coaching from me and to learn from incredible guest speakers who are going to share their best practices and growth. Remember, you become the people that you spend the most time with. So why not spend time within a community that is going to elevate you and your life? For an introductory $499, you're going to get a full year of support and coaching alongside high performers who are committed to expanding their careers, their growth, their finances, and to elevate their overall quality of life. Just click the link in the show notes or log into rudiriekstins.com to lock in your spot and start your transformation today. Welcome to the Empowered Life Podcast, a space dedicated to spreading the message that you have the power within to create everything you seek.
So if you're ready to enroll in a new kind of higher learning, the kind that leads to true personal freedom, then hang here with us.
We're your hosts, Rudi and Anniston Riekstins, and this is the Empowered Life. Welcome to the Empowered Life Podcast. You're joined by Rudi and Anniston Riekstins, and as always, we are wanting to bring you incredible information that carries the power and the potential to irrevocably change your life. We believe that you've come here to do something really big and really profound, and that there are unbelievable tools that are available to you if you have awareness. You know, what's interesting is in any program that either of us have, we always talk about awareness. When you have awareness, you can make better decisions. You can do things differently, but it's about learning and growing and expanding. And so today we want to talk to you a little more about energy. You know, I work in energy. I bring the concept of energy into business. Anniston works with energy as it relates to healing women. And we want to talk to you today about energy, but we want to bring it to you in a context that we don't often talk about in a public platform, most certainly not on the podcast, but we wouldn't be serving you if we didn't touch on your sexual energy. You know, even when we use the word sex, and we say sex or sexual, then there's all of a sudden a stigma. There's like that's right, or it's wrong, or people allow that to have a connotation. I want you to just literally put that hat down for a moment today and just listen to this with an objective opening, if you will, of your awareness receptors. Just draw in more information and then ask yourself, how does this resonate with you? Because we are going to talk today about sex. We're going to talk today about sexual energy, and we're going to talk about what does it look like in the sanctity of a safe, beautiful, loving marriage to use sexual energy to create the life of your dreams.
I think this is going to be an interesting episode, and it's one that we've wanted to record for a while. And I think it's because just more and more and more and more, we're realizing the importance of really understanding our own energy, understanding the resources that we have to work with. And, you know, as Rudi and I do, you know, we're constantly studying, we're constantly putting ourselves in rooms and, you know, learning from new people and expanding our minds into what is possible for us. And we also like working smarter, not harder. And so if we have the ability to tap into a tremendously powerful source of energy within to use to manifest, to use for inspiration, to use to create more joy, love, abundance, and empoweredness in our life, then we're certainly going to at least look into it. We're certainly going to learn and educate ourselves about this. And so what we wanted to do today was to share with you guys some of what we have learned as it relates to sexual energy. What is it really? And how can you cultivate it? And how can you harness your sexual energy to manifest? I actually think that our experience of sexual energy typically, and I say our, not just Rudi and I's, but everyone's experience of sexual energy, of feeling that feeling of, being turned on, is actually typically one of our first experiences of energy, of really being able to sense a shift in energy, because it can happen so quickly, right? Where you're feeling one way one moment, and then you're feeling another way another moment. Your whole physiology changes. Your mood changes. What you're thinking changes. And you start to feel it grow and expand within your body. But I believe if we could see energy, if all of us could just snap our fingers and see what is really happening in our field when we are, let's say we've flipped that switch and we are feeling sexual energy moving and growing and expanding within our field, I think that we would be amazed, because we would see how quickly it positively expands our field. It lightens our field. It raises the vibration of our field.
I want to be very clear that when we're talking about harnessing sexual energy for the benefit of creation, because that's what we want to talk about today, is about using the sexual energy to create something specific in your life. We're referring to it within the safety of a loving, committed relationship. Because you can have a sexual energetic experience with a stranger and it's not going to carry the same power or the same potential. And when we talk about harnessing, there needs to be an element of trust and safety and security within that sexual practice. And you can also do this by yourself. But again, it's going to be by yourself in trust, or it's going to be with a loving partner in trust, and then understanding how does the energy move, and then how can you use the energy. We're going to use this as a conversation today that is a thought starter for you, so that you can do your own homework and learn a little bit more about who you are and the brilliance of who you are, that you can live, as Anniston said earlier, an easier life, because it can be easy. There are cheat codes to having and being and doing. But I want you to think about the last time or the first time that you had a arousal. When you start to get aroused, you are building something, and it just feels like it expands and it expands and then it expands outside of yourself. Well, what's interesting is one of my most successful meditations is a meditation where I take people into their mind. I get them to curate the feeling of being completely calm and completely still. And then I get them to imagine drawing this pulsation of white energy that enters the top of the head and then it expands to fulfill the entire body. Then they take in another breath and it expands and it fills and exceeds what we would say the limitations of the physical body. And then it expands past your house, past your neighborhood, past your city, past your state, the whole country. And you build this energetic footprint. Well, it's exactly the same thing, except an arousal is like an explosion. It happens so quick, so fast, and it literally taps and touches every single cell inside your body. And when we talk about sex, what is sex in its truest form? It is the creation of life. When you ejaculate, you are essentially pouring light and life and an intention out and into the world. And the same would apply for a woman. You are having a sexual experience that is a transference of energy. Now, for so many people, and I can speak only for myself, for me, sex was sex. It was something that I did. I had a lot of shame around it. I compartmentalized it. And, when I eventually got to a place where I was in a relationship with Anniston, where sex became something truly sacred and beautiful, and we started to learn and identify the laws of creation, not as it related necessarily only to sex, just the laws of creation and how to create and how to hold a vision and intention and what's the end result, and to bring it into a meditative practice. And then we had learned that you could actually, at the time of having sex, you could hold a vision for an outcome as you were about to climax. And that as you hold the vision for an outcome, you are now amplifying the energy. You're taking that energy that instead would have been about imagining something in your mind or with someone, and then it just has this release and you're like, okay, well, now I'm going to go on with my day. You've instead taken that transference of energy and poured it very intentionally into the creation of something.
For us, I think learning this was really life-changing. But to Rudi's point, he had a tremendous amount of shame just from his experiences growing up and the ways that he processed and perceived his experiences, the way that he was raised to think about sex. And I had a tremendous amount. I had my own trauma, repressed memories of my trauma that came forward, several years ago. I've had a lot of layers to work through. And I think it's easy to think like, oh, well, when you meet your person, then you're just automatically like going to be released from all the past, programs of shame as it relates to sexuality and guilt and feelings of wrongness, feelings of, I shouldn't want this. I shouldn't seek pleasure. I shouldn't seek desire, because I think that's a lot of the conditioning that we all grow up in, or at least have in the past. I think that's lessening with these new generations coming in that are much more open-minded than what ours were. I think when we were young and growing up, and our parents certainly, like with what they were raised with in a very conservative society, and sex was not talked about. You just did not talk about that. That was not appropriate. You didn't really have conversations openly with your kids. And if you did, it was always about like, not getting pregnant, or, don't do this because of the negative ramifications. But I can tell you, for me, no one ever sat me down and talked about the beauty of what, making love is. And I really want you to think about those words, making love, because I always thought that was such an interesting term for having sex, right? With your partner, or with especially in a marriage or in a partnership where you do have love and respect, but making love, because what you're doing is you're curating energy, right? You're curating, and in this loving energy, man, you are high vibe, like you are at your most powerful. And so what Rudi and I, what we realized through our studies was that if we were to hold the same intention and we were to do that, while making love, crazy, amazing things happened. Like it was, we set before both babies, actually, right? Didn't we do this with both? We had set the intention, and we literally, like, we remember, we both know exactly when I became pregnant with both, because we're so intentional about it, and we created it together. We've created businesses. We've created sums of money. We've created new opportunities. We've created, amazing friendships. This has just become a part of our playground. And I will tell you that doing this and having the kind of relationship where you feel like you are coming together in the most beautiful, sacred way to create something together, there's just nothing more beautiful than that. And it is one of the most strengthening, I think, practices that we've had in our relationship. Hey, it's Anniston Riekstins here. And I want to ask you, have you ever wondered if there's more to your life and work than what you're doing right now? What if I told you that the universe is hiring and you were born to fill a role that will bring you true purpose and success? In my new #1 best-selling book, The Universe is Hiring, Discover the Role You Were Born to Fill, I'm going to show you exactly how to step into that role. This isn't just a book full of inspiration. It's a roadmap to help you start shifting into a more fulfilling life right now. You'll get clear on your unique purpose, learn how to align with your strengths, and take actionable steps towards the career and life that truly light you up. If you're ready to make a change and start living the life you were meant for, grab your copy today. Available anywhere you buy your books online or click the link in the show notes.
So why we wanted to talk about this on the podcast and eventually ultimately bringing it forward to you is we want you to have the awareness that in every moment of every day, you are creating. And we are wanting to bring awareness to the fact that you can create more intentionally. If you are having sex with yourself or with someone else and you are feeling guilt and shame, you are using that magnified energetic field to birth and create what it is that you're thinking and feeling. And so you're going to be birthing more shame. You're going to be birthing more guilt. You're going to be birthing more not enoughness, filling a void that's never going to be filled. And we're not going to go into all of the details as it relates to energetic sex, because I'll never forget my mom sitting me down. I must have been 10, 11 years old. And she said to me, Rudi, if you have sex with someone karmically, you take on their karma, you take on their energy, and you've got to be very careful with the partners that you pick. And yep, that was the household I grew up in, very spiritual conversations from a very young age. And that always sat with me. And so every time I was interested in potentially moving forward with somebody, I would always ask myself, do I want to be energetically tied to this person for the rest of my life? Like, not just have a baby and now you're stuck with someone. I was like, energetically, even if there's no baby, do I want to bring their karma? And that is a conversation for a completely different day. And I highly recommend you educate yourself on the topic. But we wanted to focus today in on the energy with which you are creating. And it doesn't sound very sexy, right? And in the beginning, it's kind of clunky when you're in the middle of lovemaking and your wife says to you, what do you want to create? And you're like, what?
I recommend having that conversation beforehand.
But when you create something with someone, you are magnifying and multiplying exponentially that energetic footprint. I'll never forget, if sticking with the example of creating our children, Anniston and I had spoken about we were ready to have kids, and she had stopped taking the pill, and it had been weeks. And she was about to head out on a business trip, and she was going to be gone for a number of weeks. And so she came to me and she said, you know what, I think I'm ovulating. I think that the stars are aligned. Like, today's the day, but we only have this day. Otherwise, we're going to have to wait another month until I get back, and all the things that were going on in our world. And I want you to really think about that. When somebody's been on a pill for many years and then they go off it, it takes time. It's got to release out of your body. There's all these things that you need to go through when we're following a linear path of what people believe to be possible. But I will never forget the two of us going into our bedroom with the intention of making a baby. We weren't just making love. We were making a baby. And we both held that intention. And, without any specifics, I just remember right at the end, we put our foreheads together and breathing into each other's faces. We were like, we just made a baby. Like, oh my God, we just made a baby. And that sounds so silly. And if I were to hear someone say that, I would be like, oh my God, you two are ridiculous. But she was gone on this business trip. And I think she came back 3 weeks later. She was in Europe. And when she came back, she was pregnant. Like, we were pregnant. And like, what are the odds? And I joked with her entire pregnancy because she was in Europe. And I said, if this boy comes out with blue eyes and blonde hair, and he looks like Hans, we're going to have a problem, right? Thankfully, he looked exactly like me. But what are the odds of us being able to create a little boy in one try, one time, 2 weeks after getting off the pill, in that one window that was so small. And for so many people, they struggle to conceive or to create. And I want to use this on any topic, not just as it relates to birthing a child into the world, but we very intentionally held that vision that in that moment, at that point of heightened emotion, heightened climax, heightened energy, we sent the intention to bring a child into the world. And that was what we created. And as Anniston had alluded, we've done this in so many different areas of our life, creating something, building something. And I just want to bring to your awareness that as you have that heightened expansive state inside your mind, inside your body, that it updates the energy around you, two things. What is it that you're feeling? Do you have to rework some of the shame that you have? Because I'm going to tell you now, I am not the same person I used to be as it related to my association with sex. Anniston is not the same person that she was 10 years ago. We would never have had the confidence and the courage to talk about this on this podcast.
Maybe even like a year ago, we might not have had the courage. Now we're like, whatever. They know us. We're no more secrets in terms. That's our motto is like, you know what, if something works for us and we find it powerful and it's our truth, like we certainly want to at least bring it here for you to consider. And if it feels right to you, great. But I will say, if you really think about it, like, what you're doing, you're both of you when you come together. And obviously if you're on your own, that's one thing, because you can still generate and cultivate energy. But when in partnership with someone, right? Everything is amplified and you're generating all of this energy. And if you don't channel that energy for a specific thing, nothing's wrong. It's just not necessarily going to go into, it's not a focused transmutation of that energy. So all Rudi and I are doing is giving it a focus, right? We're already building it. It's already happening. And that's what the beautiful thing of building your sexual energy and of then, in the practice of making love, it's healing for the human body. It's been scientifically shown to be healing for the human body, but if you still feel like you're carrying a tremendous amount of shame, or we use shame a lot because that was a big thing for Rudi and I. But if you're really honest with yourself and you think, okay, when I hear the word sex, how do I feel? Is there a lot of negative undertones there? I had a very different upbringing than Rudi. I mean, I grew up in a very religious household. I grew up like Southern Baptist. I mean, I'm pretty sure I had to like sign a contract that I wouldn't have sex before marriage when I was like 13 or 14. And then I felt tremendously guilty when I didn't keep that contract, and I feel like this wasn't on parent. This was just how I was perceiving everything. This was how I was interpreting sex and sexual energy. And thus I looked at the lens of every interaction I had in a relationship through the lens of guilt. And so when Rudi and I, to the degree that Rudi and I have healed this within ourselves, because this has been an individual thing. We can't, it hasn't been me healing it for him or vice versa. We've supported each other in it and we've encouraged each other. But one of the greatest gifts I have ever given myself is to heal those wounds and to be able to look through the lens at sex as beautiful and as sacred and as a gift, the gift that it is. And it has not only changed our relationship and obviously improved that area of our lives and our partnership and our marriage, but myself, like how I show up in a room is different. How I perceive things it's different. My confidence level is different. We are holographic beings. So when you heal one area of your life, it impacts every area of your life. And although, the podcast episode and the topic today is really about energy and how to harness sexual energy and how to use it to create, we couldn't record this episode without telling you the work that we did to get there. And not to say that it has to take a long time. I think it's just a matter of focus and a matter of willingness and being courageous enough to say, I really need to do some work here, or I really need to journal about this. And even if you just, tomorrow morning you sat down and you said, what do I need to know about, or what do I need to change within me in order to improve my sexual relationship with my husband or my partner, or, because it's always an inner game. It's like, what do I need to change about me? What do I need to know about this? And that will at least start the conversation. And then the things that you need to heal will come. The right book, the right teacher, the right coach. We've had a journey of that. And now we're still, I feel like there's always still more layers to uncover, but our ability, and we always get instant feedback, right? Because we see what's being created and the ease with which it's being created and the response, right? So we've experimented here. And as we have healed, that intentional focus of sexual energy and using that to manifest has become infinitely stronger for us.
I feel like there are going to be so many people that are going to be like, you know what, this is an exercise that Rudi and Anniston are suggesting that I'm going to get behind because I get to have fun while I practice this exercise. Where so much of the work that we give you is really work. It's journaling. It's sitting with your thoughts, your feelings. It's meditating. It's waking up early. It's doing exercise. But this is sex. You get to have lots of amazing, crazy, hot, wild sex, but you get to create beautiful things. I want to ground something for a moment. Years ago, I think 3 years ago, I did a business summit where I interviewed 24 of the world's leading experts in mindset in business. And one of the experts that I interviewed was a Tantric sex coach who works in business. Not exclusively, but she did work in business. And we had the most incredible hour-long conversation as it relates to her teaching tantric sex practices inside of corporations. She works a lot with like the YPO, which is the Young Presidents Organization. And these are, CEOs or presidents of really big companies. They have to have $40 million net worth. They've got to have X amount of employees. And they would bring her in to talk about tantric sex at work. Now, think about this, because no one talks about sex with their friends, let alone bringing it into work, into the boardroom. But she would be brought in to host these seminars to teach about it. And it was such a captivating and engaging, interview. And we got so much feedback from people saying, oh my God, I've never thought of that before. That's brilliant. It makes all the sense in the world. And I want to tie in just a little bit of some of the highlights that I remember from that interview. And I haven't heard that interview in I want to say 3 years, but what I really remember taking away from that was, her name is Bibi, and she shared on the episode that when you walk into a boardroom, you walk in with all of you. So your shame, your guilt, your successes, your fate, everything comes with you. And that when she works with high-level leaders, men and women, and they heal their sexual identity, and they walk into a room, they walk in as a very different person. Now, Anniston and I have both articulated that because we've done the work. But she would say that she was actually able to see somebody who used to be a meek and mild person in life and in business, who wouldn't take up any space, who would have a creative thought land in their mind, or they would have an opinion, and they would just sit there and say, oh no, my opinion doesn't matter. When they healed their sexual energy, when they healed their sexual shame, they would sit in that boardroom and they would say, I have an opinion, I have something to share. Actually, you know what? A creative thought just landed, and they were received very differently in that room. And what was happening and transpiring in that room has nothing to do what was happening in the confines of their relationship with their home or with their body, but it translates energetically into that boardroom. When companies were taught the creative power of using sexual and harnessing sexual energy. And we didn't learn this from her directly. This was years before that we had uncovered this, but she absolutely did expand our mind exponentially as it relates to energy. One of the things that I really resonated with that I'd never thought of before was your ability to cycle your energy. So I'm aware that you have an energetic footprint, and your body is made up of all these moving atoms and particles, but when you use tantric sexual energy, you can actually cycle the energy up from your sexual glands all the way up to the top of your head and then back down the front of your body and create this loop of sexual energy. And if you can generate that energy and then move that energy, you're building it and building it and building it. And then if you're in a relationship with someone and the two of you are doing that, you can cycle that energy from each other back into each other. just think about what that looks like if we were to layer the energy. So remove the physical, remove the labels, and just look at what's happening. You are generating the cycle of building and of building and of building. And no wonder when two people are holding the same thought, the same outcome, it's grounded in something good, and they're cycling that energy. And then at that moment of creation, where is all of that energy going to? And that is why we've been able to create such beautiful and profound things. But again, I'm going to bring it back to, you need to have a little bit of awareness. And so hopefully this conversation has been a short and sweet one that has just, piqued your interest and you're like, never thought of that before. Or, whoa, I am really triggered right now. And how dare they talk about that? All of that is information. And we just want you to sit with that information and then ask yourself, where do you want to take this conversation next? Because there are so many resources that are available to you. I think, again, the more that you know, the more choices you have, the better options that you have. And we were created by the Creator for the sole purpose of coming here to create, to create life, to raise children so they can create further life. But we also have the power and the potential to create our reality, the life we're living and the things we bring into our life. And we were created with incredible tools to be able to draw and generate and then further create. And life gets really good when you start to play with some of these energies.
Yeah. I mean, sexual energy is creative energy, is what it is. And there are many different outside of the act of, or the practice of, making love or having, sexual activity. There are certain forms of yoga, right? Like Kundalini yoga that practices the breath of fire, which is all about cultivating and generating that energy, that sexual energy that is stored down in your sacral chakra, which is creative energy. Your sacral chakra is where your creativity comes from, and moving it up through all of your chakras. So it starts to move. And when that happens, there's more inspiration. You have more energy. They call it like more life force energy to play with, because it's not all being trapped in one space and not, untapped. So I think there are many, many, many different ways that you can start to become more aware of this energy that you have to play with, that you have to utilize, that you have to harness. And there are many ways that you can really start to optimize it. And our hope is that this just is a conversation starter, that it kicks off some thoughts for you. Thankfully, we live in a world full of information and, for you to want to learn more. Rudi and I actually both recorded podcast episodes separately with Bibi, who is the woman he was talking about, who is the Tantric business coach, a while ago. So if you kind of scroll back through, you will find those interviews if you want to learn more about that. But, I think the biggest thing is that, like, I used to avoid learning about this. I used to avoid the topic of anything as it related to sexuality. I mean, I obviously, and yet I would have said, oh my gosh, but Rudi and I have the most incredible partnership and intimacy. But there was just so much pain there for me. There was so much pain that I didn't want to look at. I didn't even want to think about. And wherever you go, there you are. And in whatever relationship, you're bringing it with you. And so I do want to encourage you, if this has been triggering for you, to be conscious of that and maybe to ask why. And because I can tell you, there was a time in my past where this episode and what we've just shared would have been triggering for me. So we love you guys. And we, as always, hope that you found inspiration, that this expanded your mind, so that you can live an empowered life.
At the end of every episode, I always ask you, the audience, that if there was something that resonated with you in this episode, to share it with somebody who you think might benefit from hearing this message. And I will never forget sitting in an airport at 4 a.m. I was flying back from the West Coast to the East Coast, and Anniston shared a podcast episode with me. She said, you need to listen to this. And when I looked down at the episode link, it was about sexual energy. And there I was, 4:00 in the morning, sitting in a very, very quiet airport. And all of a sudden I was like, Anniston just sent me a podcast about sex. I had to listen to it
finally.
immediately. It took 10 years. No, I'm joking. And so I got that episode and I listened to it immediately. And when I listened to it, it changed my life because it changed my relationship with myself. It changed my relationship with my body. It changed the relationship I have with Anniston, and our marriage and our life and our intimacy continues to get better and better every day in every way. But what I want to ground for a moment is it took her courage to listen to that episode. And then it took her courage to send that to her partner. And if you have someone in your life that you think could benefit from this, I know it takes courage, but my advice would be to share it with them, not so we can have greater reach and we can achieve, a higher status in the podcast rankings, but you might be changing your life and you might be supporting somebody in changing theirs. Thank you so much for listening to the Empowered Life Podcast. We freaking love you guys. We'll catch you in the next episode.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. And we would love your support in leaving us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Make sure to check the show notes for more information on how you can find us online and on Instagram. Now go create an amazing day for yourself, and we'll see you again soon.